In my last lecture, I gave you two examples of solid-liquid equilibrium, that is bismuth-cadmium system and lead-silver system, and the interpretation of these two phase diagrams. We also discussed about an important subclass of such systems called salt-water systems. How freezing mixtures can be prepared by using these systems. In today's lecture, I'll discuss, and in fact I introduce you to the miscibility in the solid state, which we have not come across so far. The lecture plan today goes like this. I'll introduce to the subject, where we talk about miscibility in the solid state. The result of it is the formation of solid solution. There are two types of solid solutions. One is interstitial solid solutions, substitutional solid solutions, and Hume-Rothery rules. It is possible to get continuous range of solid solutions. We'll discuss some systems based on this. Finally, fractional crystallization. And finally, a few words about partial miscibility in the solid state, concluding with summary. Miscibility in solid state. At first, we start questioning ourselves how a solid can dissolve in another solid to give a solution. Because we are familiar with liquid solutions. When we say liquid solution, a solvent and the solute comes to our mind. Take any liquid like water, put salt and shake it. It dissolves to give a solution which is homogeneous. But the same thing if you want to try with the two solids, it becomes difficult for us to digest that. How a solid can dissolve another solid. Why? Because of the rigidity of solids and of our mind. But there are many similarities between solid solutions and liquid solutions. Let us look at the analogies so that we can visualize how solid solutions can be formed. We know that salt has maximum solubility in water. Likewise, aluminum has maximum solubility in copper. Salt dissolves in water below its melting point. We don't have to melt the salt, put it in water to dissolve it. You simply put salt in that, it dissolves. Similarly, aluminum can dissolve in copper below its melting point. We know that benzene and water are dissimilar liquids. They are immiscible liquids, and if we try to mix them together, they separate into two phases. Likewise, lead and copper are immiscible. They form two separate phases. Phenol and water are partially miscible. Both are polar, but miscibility doesn't exceed to complete miscibility. They can dissolve a small amount of one into the other, resulting in two phases, and both the phases contain phenol and water. Likewise, copper and silver, they form two phases containing the two elements. Alcohol and water are completely miscible. You can prepare concentration of the solution ranging from 1% alcohol to 99% alcohol. Likewise, copper and gold are completely miscible, giving a continuous range of solid solution. Then what is the difference? The main difference is that the rate at which things happen in the solid state is many orders of magnitude slower than that happens in the liquid state. And you also may require drastic conditions. Take for example the diffusivity of sodium chloride in water, which is of the order of 10 raised to minus 9 meter square per second at 20 degrees centigrade. Compare that with the diffusivity of aluminum in copper. It's of the order of 10 raised to minus 34 meter square per second at the same temperature. That means it is several orders of magnitude slower. Just as one may mix salt and water to form a solution, we can also mix aluminum and copper. But the mixing, of course, has to be done Under drastic conditions, you may require higher temperatures and pressure to obtain a measurable rate. We use sintering and powder metallurgy for this purpose. Complete or partial miscibility. It is that solid solution may show complete miscibility or partial miscibility, as we shall see at a later stage. A solid state solution, or sometimes we call it co-crystal with variable composition of metals, inorganic and organic compounds can be prepared. There are two types of solid solutions that we come across: interstitial solid solutions and substitutional solid solutions. Let us look at the interstitial solid solutions. An interstitial solid solution results when the atoms like hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, which are small enough, or ions that are small enough to occupy interstitial sites in the crystal lattice. That means if you look at the solid structure, there are voids, and if the atoms of the solute are small enough, they can get into that space, voids, and thereby giving us a solid solution, which we call interstitial solid solution. The best example that we have is iron carbon system, giving a highly complicated phase diagram, and we know for certain the usefulness of this system. More importantly, substitutional solid solutions that we will be discussing. Solute atoms or ions replace solvent atoms or ions in the crystal lattice, thereby giving us a substitutional solid solution. Various examples can be given. Oxides of aluminum and chromium give us a complete range of solid solution. Then copper gold, silver gold, platinum rhodium, copper nickel, they also give us complete range of solid solutions. But there are systems like iron nickel, iron manganese, iron chromium. They also give us complete range of solid solutions, but at a high temperature. Wide range of solid solution can be obtained only at elevated temperatures. Inorganic salts also can give us solid solutions. As you can see, lead nitrate and lead chloride can give us a solid solution, and ammonium salts can give us solid solutions with a complete range of solid solutions. What is the experimental evidence? X-ray analysis shows that one constituent enters the lattice of the other constituent. The two components, the two lattices merge into each other. That means they fuse and they get distributed through it. This uniformity of distribution differentiates a solid solution from a mixture of solids, because in a mixture, each constituent retains its characteristic crystal structure, and we can identify that under a microscope. Two metals forming a solid solution. What happens? What advantages we get by mixing them? Because we look for materials having definite properties for different purposes, like tailor-made materials. So properties of solid solutions may be widely different from those of the components of the mixture. What are the properties? Electrical conductance may get modified. Similarly, acid resistance, hardness, brittleness, malleability. All these properties will be much different from the components from which these solid solutions are prepared. The properties also depend on the concentration. There are certain rules which should be followed in order to get a solid solution. It is not that if we mix any two say metals, we get a solid solution. Only under these conditions, if they are met, we can get a complete range of solid solution. Atomic size requirement. That means there should not be much distortion in the crystal lattice when the solid solution is formed. The sizes of the components should not differ by more than plus or minus 15%. We have the best example in copper nickel system, where their sizes are within plus or minus 3%. They give us possibly the complete range of solid solutions. Other conditions have to be met. Crystal structure requirement. Crystal structure of the alloying elements should be identical. Examples: copper and nickel, as I told you, their sizes are within plus or minus 3%. In addition, both are having the crystal structure face center cubic, thereby giving us a complete range of solid solution. Whereas tin and antimony, their sizes are within plus or minus 12%. If the first condition is only applied, then they should give us the solid solution. But their crystal structures are different. One is tetragonal, the other is rhombic. Thereby, they show very limited solubility. Electrochemical requirement. Electronegativities of the elements should be similar. If they are different, what happens? We get stable material by other types of bonding like ionic bonding or covalent bonding. Valence requirement. Valency of the alloying elements must be identical. Example: copper and gold. The size is within plus or minus 12%. Both are having FCC structure. They have similar electronegativities and both are univalent. Criteria for formation of mixed crystals by polar salts, in which the replacing group and the replaced group should have almost equal volumes. Look at this example: sodium chloride and sodium sulfate. The sizes of chloride and sulfate ions differ, and hence no solid solution can be formed. There must be similarity in crystal structure of the two. If different, no fusion is possible. Look at this example: sodium chloride and potassium chloride, they are very similar to us, but no solid solution is formed because they differ in their crystal structure. The unit cell of the crystals must be similar, as well as the polarization of the replacing and the replaced group should be similar. In the case of organic substances, slightly different set of rules are applied. There must be similarity in constitution, morphology, chemical nature. For example, para-dichlorobenzene and para-iodochlorobenzene, they are very similar, meeting this requirement, form a solid solution. Let us now look at the miscibility in the solid state, giving rise to what are called isomorphous systems, a continuous range of solid solutions. Phase diagrams will have regions that are univariant and bivariant. In these systems, there is no possibility of a situation where the degrees of freedom is 0. That means we do not have any invariant system within. So this is the phase diagram for a system where we have given the inorganic salts here as an example, which gives us a complete range of solid solution. The solid solutions have their melting points between the melting points of the two components. Look at the phase diagram. We have unsaturated melt, it's a bivariant system, and here we have solid solution, which is also a bivariant system, because both this and this are having only one phase, miscibility in the liquid state, miscibility in the solid state. Between these two lines, we have the two in equilibrium, the melt and the solid solution, for which the number of degrees of freedom is 1. The upper line is called the liquidus, above which the system is only in the liquid state, and we have the lower line is called the solidus. Below this, we have only solid phase. Now, if you look at the figures given here, you can see a clear melt. In between, you have solidification has taken place, you have a two-phase system, and just at the end where we reach the solidus, we have complete solid solution formation with a small trace of melt remaining. Now, let us look at how these phase diagrams are useful. You take a melt having an initial composition corresponding to point A and try to cool this along the line shown here. Cooling is allowed because it's a bivariant system. The temperature decreases without any other change till we reach the point A prime on the liquidus, at which solid makes its appearance. And this is the solid solution whose composition is much different from the original composition that we started with. This is much richer in component B. Now let us look at the progressive change that takes place while cooling a melt. As I told you, if you start from A till you reach A prime, only melt remains, and at A prime the solid separates out with the composition given by point X here. The cooling is still allowed because you are left with 1 degree of freedom, and the temperature decreases to say isotherm. The composition of the solid solution has changed from point X to this point. Similarly, the melt in equilibrium has a composition given by this end of the line. Further decrease in temperature to T3 brings in a change to A prime, the solid solution composition, which is the original composition. You are left with only a trace of the melt having a composition given by point Y. Further decrease in temperature, we get a solid solution having the composition we started with. The composition of initial mixing of A and B we started with, and ultimately we get a solid solution having that composition. Now, the same thing can be shown here as it changes the initial composition, the second composition, the third composition. Progressively, the composition of the solid solution adjusts itself to the changed circumstances. The cooling has to be done very slowly in these cases because we are dealing with solids. If you have rapid cooling, there will be non-equilibrium situations. These are all equilibrium curves. You remember, the non-equilibrium conditions may make the compositions different from what is shown in the diagrams here. Now look at this phase diagram. If you start with the initial composition corresponding to this point, at a given temperature, say T2, overall composition is given by point Y. The system is in two parts, solid solution in equilibrium with the melt. But for this overall composition, how much of the melt is there in equilibrium with the solid solution of this composition? We can see the composition of the solid solution by the line that is given. We can also look at the melt composition for the overall composition corresponding to point Y. We can use this phase diagram for separation or purification of substances. Look at this. You start with an initial composition corresponding to this. You heat it to get a melt, and this melt can be cooled, and when you cool it, say to temperature T1, you get a solid solution separating out having a composition Z. If you are able to separate this solid solution and cool it, you get a composition which is much richer in B. If that solid solution is heated again, taking it to a high temperature where it is in the molten state, and then cool it along this line, when you reach the liquidus curve at this point, the solid that separates out has a composition given by this point, which is much richer in B now. So what we have carried out? We carried out melting and cooling, resulting in crystallization of a solid. After that, we again carried out that process, a second stage of crystallization, and then if this solid solution is subjected to heat, we will get a melt, which upon cooling gives us a solid solution which has come in composition very close to the pure component B, which on further heating and cooling will give us the pure solid B. So, all in all, what you have carried out is the separation of B from A, from a mixture whose composition was about say 40% to start with. That is how these diagrams can be effectively used to find out conditions under which we can get say pure B or pure A. It is possible to use this diagram to find out the amounts of phases and their compositions with the help of lever rule. Look at this diagram, a simplified version. You start with an original composition of the mixture corresponding to X, and if you heat it to a situation where there is an equilibrium between two phases given by point B here, for this initial composition or the overall composition, you have a solid solution of composition given by X2, and the melt that is in equilibrium has a composition given by X1. The melt is richer in the low melting solid, whereas the solid solution that is formed is richer in the high melting solid. The compositions can be easily read from the diagram, but it is also possible using lever rule to find out the relative amounts of the melt and the solid solution. The calculation can be done this way. We have the weight of the liquid present, W1 proportional to BC. If you look at the diagram, weight of the solid present is W2, which is proportional to AB in the diagram, so that the total weight is sum of the two, W1 plus W2. And if you try a material balance on constituent B, we get W into X, X is the overall composition, is equal to W1 X1 plus W2 X2, and we can substitute for W here, which is sum of W1 plus W2, and then simplify. What we get is W1 into X minus X1 is equal to W2 into X2 minus X, so that the relative amount of the two phases can be obtained, which gives us W1 upon W2 is equal to X2 minus X upon X minus X1. There are situations where the miscibility may not extend to complete miscibility. That means resulting in partial miscibility of the two components. How the phase diagram looks like? There are two possibilities. One is solid solution formation with eutectic, as you see in this diagram. The system becomes slightly complicated, but the upper portion of the diagram resembles the simple eutectic system that you have studied. Only thing is that you have the miscibility region on the extremes. This is the region in which solid solution 1 exists. That means you have a solid solution that is richer in A, and the other end we have a solid solution that is richer in component B, solid solution 2. In between you have solid solution 1 and 2 together, and you have the region in which the solid solution 2 in equilibrium with the melt. So, it looks like the diagram taken from eutectic system and superimposed to accommodate for partial miscibility of the two components. We will not go into the details of it, but interpretation can be done once you have understood what happens as you move down the vertical line, which we call the isopleth, the changes that are taking place. It is also possible to have the peritectic system. In this case, you can have a solid solution, in this case solid solution 2, which is not stable, which decomposes and undergoes a peritectic reaction, thereby giving a situation that as per this line DE, which is the peritectic equilibrium, above this line solid solution 2 cannot exist. We have only solid solution 1. Our experience on peritectic systems that we have studied earlier gives us some clue how to interpret this type of diagram. Let me summarize what we looked at today. I introduced you to the subject of miscibility in the solid state resulting in the formation of solid solution. There are two possibilities: interstitial solid solutions and substitutional solid solutions. The rules that guide in the formation of solid solutions: continuous range of solid solutions, fractional crystallization, and then we looked at the phase diagrams of partially miscible systems. In my next lecture, I'll discuss about liquid gas, liquid vapor, and liquid-liquid systems. Very interesting, because we are going to deal with problems concerning distillation, separation and purification of liquids. Very interesting theoretically as well as with a lot of practical importance. Thank you.